All right, here we go. Welcome to another edition of Interruptions. Today we have a jazz legend in the building. He's done albums such as Poetry in Motion, Just an Illusion, Najee Theme, and my favorite, Tokyo Blues. Welcome,
Oh,
legend in this business, Mr. Najee. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Otis. Yeah, good to be here, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for blessing us with your presence.
Yes, sir.
My
I'm honored. Believe me, I really am. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
man, listen, what you've done with that saxophone and introducing me to a whole level of the progression of jazz
Yes.
at that time. I just thank you for your work.
Oh, well,
Um,
thank you. Thank you so
my,
much. Yeah.
Before we hit the record, I was telling you about my friend. His name is Bill Cameron,
Okay.
and I told him I was interviewing you, so I told him, I said, give me one question you want to ask Mr. Najee. Give me one question you want to ask. So I'm going to lead off with his question.
Sure.
And this question was for artists who are musicians. He plays the sax as well.
Sure.
For
Sure.
musicians that are late getting into the music industry, do you have any advice for them?
Well, I don't think it's. I don't consider anything being late. You get in when you're ready to get in. I think we're living in interesting times regarding the industry because when I came into the game as a solo artist 30 some odd years
Mm-hmm.
ago, um, the game was totally different thanks to Michael Jackson. you know, and people
Yeah.
listen. A lot of people don't give Michael a lot of credit, but I'm gonna be honest with you, man. It was the Thriller album that really, in the mid '80s, that really brought in a whole infusion of money into the recording industry, where labels were able to sign other artists, and I was probably a direct or indirect product of some of
Mm-hmm.
that money, if you will.
Okay.
But it was totally a different game in terms of marketing, promotion. I mean, we had videos. I mean,
Right.
the marketing aspects of what we did were, you had budgets for those things. Now, everything has gone independent since the rise of Napster and all these digital formats.
Sure.
The game has changed. So I think honestly, the best advice I can say, man, is one thing, which I always tell people is trust the
Mm-hmm.
voice in your head.
Okay.
Try to find a unique angle from what's already been done because. I mean, we've heard it all, you know what I mean? And what I'm hearing in a lot of young artists today, it's harder to break through, not so much because it's of the difficulties of promotion and marketing and those things, because you have YouTube, you have
Sure.
Facebook, you have Instagram, you have all these promotional outlets, but
Mm-hmm.
really in terms of finding a unique identity that people haven't heard. So I always tell them I borrow a line from a great man I heard. He once said that to envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. So just try to find the
Wow.
voice you have and go on
Wow.
that. So
That is, say that one more time. That was wonderful.
yeah, I can't take credit, but I wish I could say I was that smart, my friend. I'm not, but I did borrow it from someone else, and he said to envy is
Uh-huh.
ignorance and imitation is suicide. So,
Wow. I like
anybody,
that.
you got a lot of great ball players. They try to be like Kobe or Michael Jordan. You can't do it.
You
Just
can't
be
do
yourself.
it.
You know what I
Just
mean?
be yourself.
Yeah.
Just be
So,
yourself. Well, my first question for you is, with you saying that, it actually segue into my first question for you, which
mhm.
is, how do you come up with your sound? How did you come up with your sound? Basically, what you're talking about, being authentic, being original. When you're sitting, that inspiration hits you. Whatever that thing is for you. How do you come up with the Najee sound?
You know what? To be honest with you, I couldn't be anything else, man. I tried as a kid. I was very inspired at a young age by the sound of people like Joe Henderson and George Coleman on saxophone, King Curtis. Ultimately, in the contemporary sound, it was Grover, Ronnie Laws, John Coltrane.
Right.
But no matter how much I tried to play like those guys, I still sounded like Najee. So
Gotcha.
over time, I became quite comfortable with who I am and just accepted that that's who I am. And thank goodness it's benefited me and it's become my signature or classic sound, as people say. Particularly on soprano saxophone because
Yeah.
I hated the sound of soprano. I didn't like the sound at all. And my brother, my brother, who's a was a guitar player, we grew up together playing. He
Okay.
came. He said to me one day, "Man, you got to play soprano. You got to play soprano sax. You do." And I'm like, "Man, I ain't playing that little girl horn. I'm a tenor saxophone and flute. You can see all my tenor saxophones back here.
Right.
Tenor saxophone and flute player. That's what I do." Whereas fate would have it, uh, tenor soprano saxophone was the sound when I came out on my very first album, Najee's Theme. And I went into a store, bought a local music store in New York, bought an $800 out of tune soprano, recorded Najee's Theme, and we had a gold record in less than a year. And the next thing it went on to be a platinum album. So he was right.
He was right. So you gotta listen to family. You gotta listen to
I had to
family.
listen. Yes, sir. Yeah, so,
It's funny because you mentioned the flute,
yes.
and let me know if I'm mistaken. Maybe I didn't hear it, but the first time I heard you play the flute was on Illusions.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. That, no, that, well, I've played flute all my life, man. I mean, I just recently, as of last week, I found a record that I played on that's on a group called Obatala.
Over top.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
that I recorded when I was 16 years old, playing flute on there.
Wow.
Because so on my current album, I did a couple of flute numbers. One being the classic song, Burt Bacharach song that was recorded by Dionne Warwick, the classic Alfie, where I do a orchestral thing with flute. So flute is
Okay.
very much a part of my musical vocabulary, if you will. Yeah.
Do you get a lot of? I mean, I don't want to say a lot of requests, but when you're playing live
Hmm.
and you're playing the flute and you're
Hmm.
playing the tenor or the soprano sax,
Sure.
does does it seem like people look at you and like, nah, we want the soprano sax. Can you please bring that?
Well, you know what? I think they enjoy everything we bring. We try to bring a real experience when I'm on stage.
Right,
But, to be honest, most of my classic songs, with the exception of like a Tokyo Blue, which was recorded on tenor saxophone,
right.
are soprano songs. So when you think of Sweet Love, Bet You Don't Know, Gina,
Oh,
Najee's Theme,
Gina,
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah, those
Yeah.
were all soprano songs, and so I went from this guy who actually didn't like the instrument to actually loving it because it made me a lot of money. What can I say?
Hey, you gotta go. Hey, you gotta go with what works.
But yeah, but no, they love pretty much everything. We always I always play flute songs, and
Sure.
we cover the whole spectrum live. So
What what inspires Najee? What inspires you?
what peace, sound living. I've been very blessed to have a great life. My kids are grown. They've all gone to college and they're out. And, so now at this stage of my career, I'm actually having fun, you know.
Okay.
Uh, and, I don't take it, it doesn't mean the same to me as it did when I was younger. When I was younger, you're in the competitive stage of life. You're really trying to figure out how to be in the game, how to stay in the game, how to be relevant in the game. At
Right.
this stage of my life, I've done so much, man, particularly playing with so many artists. I mean, you think about, my career when I started as at the age of 18, my very first world tour was for the USO, with a band from New York City called Area Code. And then, after college, my brother and I went to college. And after we came back, after we couldn't afford to go anymore, we were fortunate to get on the Ain't Nobody tour with Shaka Khan in 1983 and
Okay.
tour with her. And then, and then that went on to having a solo career for me. And in between that time, I've worked with everybody, man. I've toured with Prince. I've recorded with him. I mean,
So,
and yeah, people like him, Quincy Jones, Patty LaBelle. I mean, and the list goes on. Phyllis Hyman, and so many, many, many other people that I've had the pleasure of working with. So
do you find the artists today, not, I'm talking about just music, period, not
yeah,
necessarily, jazz, but do you think they don't study the greats enough as far as people? Well, when you mentioned Michael, I remember watching an interview with Michael. He always talked about that. He was
yes,
always watching one that came before him. And
yes.
so, and you mentioned who inspired you and, who you was listening to and then whom you work with. Do you think from whether it's jazz or whether R&B, gospel, whatever type of genre of music it is, do you
Hmm.
think that some of the younger generation are lacking that progression they should have, or diversity in their
Uh-huh.
game of music, because they don't sit down, use an example, and talk to a Najee.
No, I can't say that. I can honestly say that a lot of the artists I've watched have studied, and have
Oh,
studied some of the greats. I have to say that because,
okay.
I mean, I was watching, listening to Beyonce. I had the pleasure of doing one show with her at one of the Trumpet Awards years
Okay.
ago, and I was actually in the orchestra with George Duke backing her up. And
Okay.
I was very impressed with her ability to, she wasn't in the era of singing like a Sarah Vaughan or,
Sure.
Ellis Fitzgerald, but she had educated herself enough with the elements of that genre that it helped her to be who she is today.
Gotcha.
And I see that in a lot of artists. Jill Scott, you can
Uh,
tell, yeah, you know what I mean? And we can go on down a long list of people. I mean, even down to a brother like Kenny Lattimore, or,
yes.
they all studied other people, Marvin Gaye, and, all the great artists, I think. So I think there are true artists. True artists are going to always connect, with
Sure.
that, even down to the gospel artists, Doobie Powell, one of my favorite gospel artists. I mean, he,
Okay.
you can tell he studied many, many, many great artists, and he is who he is today.
Did you ever? I know Joe Sample did, but
Yeah. Hmm.
did you, before it passed? I don't know if you had worked with. Did you ever get to
Yes,
work
I did
with the
work with Joe.
Daryl Coley?
With
What
who?
with Daryl Coley?
Unfortunately, no. I can't say I did. Yeah, I would have loved
I
to have
know
worked with
Joe
him, though.
did. I know Joe did, and
Yeah.
you and Joe have always been my two favorite jazz artists,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
it's
thank you.
something. It's something you both do. Of course, he's on the piano
Yeah.
and you're on the flute and you're on the sax. But whether it's a up tempo beat, right, or whether it's a slow, mellowed out song, you
Sure.
guys always have your own imprint on it.
Yes.
And that's
Hmm.
why I was asking you about the Najee sound, because you have your own. I know when I'm listening to something from Najee. You don't have to
Right.
actually tell me. You don't have to. I just know. I know it's you.
Sure. Sure.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to tip, and thank you for that. My next question for you is, um, what, with the progression of music and the progression of jazz, what is the most misconception of a jazz artist that you think that people think?
Well, I think there's several. Honestly, one is that jazz musicians are broke. I'm not broke, so.
You're not.
Well, I'm not saying that you don't have some of us that are. No, I'm not saying that.
Right.
But the other misconception, I think, is that the music is inaccessible to the common ear. And I
Mhm.
think some of us as jazz musicians are to blame for that. You know, when an artist is truly committed to his art, you can hear the sincerity. It'll touch something in the person. Um, you know, uh, so I think first of all is really just the common idea that all jazz is boring and all that, blah blah blah. And I don't agree to subscribe to that at all. So yeah.
No, I can testify it's not boring.
Yeah.
Like I said, from your song Gina, to Cruise Control,
Yes, sir.
Tokyo Blue. Uh, I mean, even let me ask you a question. What was
Sure.
your thoughts? Because this blew me away. Because he came in. Wayman Tisdale came in the time frame where you were already out there.
Yeah.
Gerald Albright. A lot of you guys were already out there, had started really to make a name for yourself. And
Yes,
he
sir.
took an instrument that's normally not a lead instrument.
Right.
Far as a jazz artist, what was your take? What did you enjoy about Wayman Tisdale?
Well, he was a very special person in many ways. I mean, not only from the musical standpoint, but the fact that he was able to have a second career, a
Yeah,
real career, because everybody is familiar with his NBA career and his stats and all
right.
that. But he was able to do something that he loved, as well, and he aligned himself with people who were doing that, such as Marcus Miller, Stanley Clark. I mean, he studied and he listened to all those folks. I mean, and I grew up with Marcus, so when I heard Wayman, I could hear the influence of Marcus on his playing.
Oh, oh,
Stanley and Clark and I have recorded and toured together for several years, and so I could hear the influence on his playing, but he was able to make it, where, I mean, if you went to a Wayman Tisdale show, it was always fun. It was a dance. It was a party, and, so he was able to combine the musical elements as well as the party elements. And and not only that, he was just a great human being. I mean, just the nicest guy, man. I mean, had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs with him. So,
yes,
yes, sir.
yeah. I was all from afar, as a fan looking back.
Sure.
I was before he got sick. I was always waiting on that collaboration, hopefully with you and Joe and some of the other artists that I
Yeah,
like.
we actually had talked about it several times, Joe and I, and so did Wayman and I. We had talked about it, but we just never got around to it. Our schedules just never
Sure,
brought it
sure,
back
I
together.
understand. Yeah,
Yeah. So
you're one of the. I won't say one of the last because, like you say, you got Albright,
yeah,
Kurt
sure.
Whalum,
Hmm.
but it's not that you guys kind of touch people in all genre of music,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
can you talk about that? Not saying that there's an ingredient to
Yeah.
it, but can you talk about the how just being an artist, just being who you are yourself, and maybe some of the other guys, how you guys were able to touch people like you talked about Beyonce that just work in different genre of music.
Sure. Well, I think honestly, we were products of the time we came in. In my case, you mentioned Kenny G, but I do recall. I know I got a chart up here somewhere where it shows our history a little bit back in
Right,
'86. But Kenny G, by the time I came around, he had already had 4 albums out. And the
right.
story goes, and I'm not putting anything bad out there that's not true, but
No, sure,
yeah,
sure.
the story goes that he was about to be dropped by Arista, and Najee's theme came out, was out on Billboard for 13 weeks at number one. And of course, the rest is history. His album had been out a year at that point. Clive Davis
Sure.
revived his album, and the rest is history for him. So that doesn't take anything away from his ability as an
Sure,
artist or a musician. But the
sure.
reality is that the market of the time, when I came into the game, they called what I did jazz. Now I'm a jazz musician, but I don't think my first 2 albums were jazz albums by any mean. They were really R&B records with the saxophone as the lead voice, and
Right.
and I made a conscious decision to do that. Because I realized when the industry went into a decline in the early '80s before the advent of Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Right.
Most of the contemporary jazz scene, as we knew, had been changed by people like George Benson and Grover Washington and Ronnie Laws and Bob James, David Sanborn, people like that. But the
Right.
industry went into a real economic slump. And when I came into the game, it was a revival. So I was almost like that next generation that came along. And basically, I grew up in New York City. I grew up in an area where jazz was the prominent culture of music, but I also had a deep R&B background because I played in the local bands in my neighborhood. So,
Okay.
and
Okay.
nobody wanted to hear Giant Steps when you were playing at the school parties, and you know what I'm saying? Or when you played in the little rinky-dink clubs, they want to dance, they want to get down, man. So,
Right.
so I came from that background. So I naturally combined the two, and the
Okay.
rest is history. And I think that's true probably for my colleagues that you mentioned, Gerald and Kirk as well, and many others, Walter Beasley, of course. So, we just came through in a time when the culture was ready, for that. Yeah.
Well, what you guys did for us, and I can attest to it, is that you guys allow, especially being a man, that you can put that music on. You don't have to say nothing. You don't have to mess yourself up, like
Ah,
put it in your mouth. You can just play Najee, or,
right,
or
right.
something. And like you said, but also, you know what I noticed, and even for this with athletes, and let me see if get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
I always say sometimes, how when you look at football and basketball players, and some guys have gotten caught in domestic violence, right?
Mm,
Domestic
yeah.
violence situations, right? And I always said I don't think they listen to anything that brings them down. You know, when you working out and you getting ready to play, you got all this aggression, right? So you may listen to some rap, right? You may listen to some, you know, pump you, get you
Aggressive stuff,
going.
yeah.
But when right, but when the day is over, I know for me, a hard day's work, you're mad, upset, happy, whatever. We would put you on, Joe Sample on those guys, and you guys, and wind down
Yeah,
from the. And I just feel like that with the youth today is they don't play music to unwind
right.
from from the day. What are your thoughts on
Well,
something like that?
I think that's partially true. You know, I didn't know until I met Michael Jordan that he was an actual fan of mine, you know, and Deion Sanders and others, you know, they always tell me, you know, man, you the cat, you know, you the brother. Because I would do the national anthem back in the 90s for different teams, and they all knew who I was and allowed me to hang out with them and do all kind of stuff, you know. But yeah, I think music plays a part in people's psychology, and you know well. Let me just say
Okay.
it can serve different purposes. You know, as
Okay.
you say, it can be used to rile you, but also bring you down. You know,
Right.
uh, so yeah, thank you, thank you.
No, no, it's and I can see why like I said, it's so funny because you can't go back and get that time that you talked about when you're looking
Right?
at my backdrop and you say, "Where's who is that young
Yeah, who's
guy?"
that young man back there,
You
right?
you came you came in an era
Yeah.
that the atmosphere was made for you guys who
Yes.
came
Yes.
in that era, and we were ready for uh, the of you guys being authentic and genuine and who you guys were. It's like you
Sure.
really didn't have to do anything but just be you, come out and just do the best that you could do, and
Sure.
the atmosphere was just made for you guys.
There
And
was.
I
Yes. It was a
yeah
different climate for sure. Yes.
yeah different. Well, in this climate of music, who does or even just before whatever, who do you listen to? Who do you like?
Oh gosh,
It's
man.
any genre of music doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Gosh, man. You know, for me as an artist, I listen to everything. You know, Duke Ellington once said, you know, people get caught up in all these titles and all
Hmm.
this and this genre of music. But for
Hmm.
me, you know, I believe what Duke Ellington said, which is there's only two kinds of music, good or bad, you know. So
Okay.
for me, I listen to everything. I mean, I'll admit sometimes I still listen to Biggie, man. I mean, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
mean, he'll pop out, you know, on my car. I'm like, hey, man, this is some nice throwbacks, you know, Dougie Fresh, you know. Um,
Hey. Hey.
you
You
know,
talking
so
some classic?
yeah, man, you know, so I mean, I listen every day. I mean, I've been listening to Doobie Powell, who's a great gospel artist I told you about.
Uh-huh.
Who else? I still listen to John Coltrane, you know, Miles Davis recordings, Herbie Hancock, and so many others. You know, James Galway on classical flute. You know, I still do that. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm like you. I like a lot of different types of music. I listen to rap. Well, I can't really listen to rap today. I tell you, Najee, I got old and didn't know it.
tell me about it.
I
I know how you feel.
listen. I was watching. I was trying to watch the hip hop awards
Oh
a couple years back, maybe 4 years ago, and it was so funny. I had to look at my daughters and say, "Who is that?"
man.
I was trying to figure out where have I been because I didn't know any of the artists.
Oh, listen. I was trying to explain to my son who Dougie Fresh was. He didn't get it. You know, he couldn't relate. You know, or Tribe Called Quest. He was like, "Who's that, Dad?" You know. The only reason why he knows who's Prince is because he's seen videos of me playing with him. You know. So,
Did you ever get a chance to meet those guys, Tribe Called Quest? Because I
oh
know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, because I know their music was heavily jazz sampled.
That's
So
right. Q-Tip and all those
I
guys.
think,
Yeah.
I think like you might have been, influential to those guys.
Well, you know, Q-Tip actually came from the neighborhood I grew up in Queens, Jamaica,
Okay.
Queens, New York.
Okay.
Um, you know, which in the music industry, and there's a famous song, "Funkin' for Jamaica," Jamaica funk. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
people think that, yeah, people think they're talking about the island of Jamaica, but Tom Brown is a trumpet player from my neighborhood, Jamaica, Queens,
okay.
and so that song is, you know, Marcus Miller is playing bass on there, you know, uh,
Uh-huh.
but you know that was. You know, what can I say, man? Those eras were just where music just came together for us, and we made an impact on the world, not knowing that's what we were going to do. And you know, thank God we did. You know, so
I think that you did, and
yes,
that you're
sir.
still doing. You know that
Yes,
you're
sir.
still doing it, and you're still blessing us with your music and everything. My final question for you is: when you have composed something, right?
Hmm.
You've put it together. What is the production like? Like how you know when you know when they show R&B or rap, you know they kind of
Sure.
show some production, but jazz. I've always been curious of how does one put together a jazz composition?
Well, it can, for me as a writer, as a songwriter, it can come by myself. But
Mm-hmm.
I always find that some of the best, and honestly, some of my classic songs like Noah's Ark, I wrote all of my own, played all the instruments and stuff. But I find that that sometimes the best inspiration comes from working with other people. You know, jazz is a music that requires group cooperation, if you will.
Sure.
So either with one or more people. So I always find that some songs, depending on what they are, man, they come together in different ways. I could be at home composing, so I can hear it in my head and want to produce it, or somebody will submit stuff. Like most of the stuff I've done over the last few years has been collaborations, really, you know, and even with vocalists. I mean, the last few years I've had people like Eric Benet, I've had Phil Perry, I've had
Sure.
Mesa, I've had Will Downing. I mean, and the list goes on and on. On his current album, Center of the Heart, I have Kenny Lattimore on there, you know. So collaborations have been really the way to get a lot of inspiration. Because for me, I get a little bored with my formula after a while. You know, trying to do everything myself. It's like,
Right.
yeah, that's not sound like something you
Switch
did
it up.
10 years ago, man. You maybe need to go another way. You know?
So, So the
So,
so the latest one out now is Center of My Heart.
Center of the Heart, yeah, yeah.
Center
As a
of the
matter of fact,
Heart.
you know, we were talking about Q-Tip. I tried to get him. I wanted to get him on one song on there called "One No Love." I ended up putting my son writing on there because once my son laid down the voice over the beat, man, I was like, well, who needs Q now at this point? You know,
Yeah,
it sounds great
well,
on his own.
you can't take him off either. You can't take him off.
Yeah. So yes, sir.
Well, you know, we want to make sure that we have you on again,
Yes, sir.
and pick your brain again on you know on music. We
Sure.
appreciate what you have brought to music. Period, not just jazz, but just you know music. Period.
Oh, thank you.
I'll post when this comes out. I'll make sure I have your website on there and
Sure.
everything. We can still go check you out and everything. You always handled yourself with class and grace.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you, sir.
you've
Appreciate it.
always been upstanding. It's a pleasure for me to have the honor and opportunity to interview you. So thank you once again for coming on the
Oh, it's my
show.
pleasure, Otis. Thanks for
And,
inviting me. Hey, man, let me leave you with something real good, man. Let me,
sure,
since I had the flute here, you know.
please, yeah, that's the food.
There you go, my friend.
Oh, look. Now you got me want to put a request in.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, once again, thank you for coming on.
My
I'll reach
pleasure.
out to your people and make sure, you know, can bring you back on based on your
Yes, sir.
schedule.
And let me know when you're
Be,
airing. We'll post it and make sure people know about it. Okay.
say that again.
Yeah, let me know when you're gonna do this and post it. You know, we'll make sure we promote it as well on our end.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Once
man.
again, be safe and be blessed.
You too,
Have a
brother.
great
Be well. Bye bye.
day.
Peace.